Vince Guzzo, the one and only, is on the phone line, and we got some small business tips for you. Something that I hope, Vince, that we can turn into a regular thing. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Les.
First things first, before we get to some tips for small businesses, particularly, with the news we have that 60% of small businesses in Quebec need help from the government right now. But I need to ask you this, Vince Guzzo, because you are from Cinema Guzzo, the CEO of Cinema Guzzo. The box office this weekend in North America had a weekend that surprised a lot of observers, 13.7 million just for Tom and Jerry. And I know you decided to keep your theaters closed. Cineplex opened up their cinemas. They had like 40 showings per day of Tom and Jerry. Just after the weekend's over now, do you regret, or do you have any second thoughts about your decision to keep Cinema Guzzo closed?
No, not at all. I mean, you have to remember that, you can open a theater and you can make money. The problem is how much of that money that you made as revenue stays to you. I think the theaters, all of the Quebec theaters, let's put it this way, all of the Quebec theaters made the same number on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday that last year, same period, only my theaters did. So that means that they're at about 19%, 20% of the total number that the province should have done, right? But out of that, half of that money is going to a movie distributor. So now only 10% is yours. You've got no concession sales. You've got nothing on the upside to try and make ends meet. Nobody has a break-even point of 10% of revenue or profit or gross margin. Nobody can operate at that level. I mean, they can do it for a week. Next week is going to be more complicated because I'd say 80% of the theaters have no day shows. So they're going to be after, they normally open at 6 p.m. How will they be able to open with a 8 o'clock curfew?
So what do you think, Vince? What do you think Cineplex decided to open up for the week? What's when you mentioned those numbers, the 10% and all that stuff, why do you think they stayed open?
I think that they were worried of the public backlash of saying, "Oh, you guys," I think they really believe the public bought into this whole this whole Premier Legault's thing of we're doing this for the kids. It's a big sacrifice. It's all about the kids. When at the end of the day, I mean, for the weekend, we found out that Triple X theaters were open. Those were not for the kids, were they? I hope that Anyway.
Hopefully not. Okay, so we're with Vince Guzzo. He's CEO of Cinema Guzzo, and we want to give you some small business tips. And again, as I mentioned off the top, the hope is that we can start to do this on a more regular basis. Now, we got some interesting stats that 60% of small businesses in Quebec need help from the government right now to keep their head above water. Vince, what are your tips? What are your recommendations to a small business owner that is basically struggling to stay afloat because of all the restrictions?
I think most business owners have to put their pride aside, and they've got to go ask, a relief from the banks. If they can avoid paying back when they're paying their loans, if they can avoid paying back some capital for X amount of months, it's a good idea to do it because one of the biggest mistakes you can do is say, well, it's okay, I'll pay the capital and then I'll have that found money. Everybody knows as you pay back a loan, the equity, you're actually building equity as you're paying down your loan. The problem is the banks are not evaluating that way right now. So you might as well stop that bleed right now. Pay only the interest. Get a reprieve of capital repayment. Don't feel that it's going to be too complicated to go ask for subsidy money from the government. If you're part of the REM program and if you're one of the businesses in the red zones that could go get that $15,000 forgivable, go out and do it. I mean, I know it's complicated. I've spoken to the Minister Fitzgibbons and he says, I don't know what's so complicated about it. I tried to explain it to him. I think the biggest complication was that, it's an Investissement Québec program, but the truth of the matter is you got to go through your bank. And banks were not necessarily properly trained on how that whole program works. But it is ultimately, if you can show that you're spending more than $20,000 a month in certain sectors of your expenses, you can actually get a loan for $20,000 a month, and then you can get 15 forgiven down the line 6 months later by this program. So, the biggest problem business people have is we try and sort of, we got our pride and we try and not, want really the help of anybody. I think, if there are government programs, go get them. I would go first to the forgivable program. There's a new HASCAP program. You can go up to $1 million per legal entity to go get with BDC. I think everybody should go try and do that. But go first for the forgivable programs, because ultimately what you don't want is to increase debt, and that's what everybody's doing right now. I mean, I told my bankers early on in this pandemic, April, May, I said to them, you do realize that you guys will all have to change your mindset, right? These loans over 5 years, you do realize you're going to have to extend everything to a 10-year loan, because nobody's going to be able to pay you back in 5, considering everybody's been indebting themselves with zero to show for, right? So, for example, I built a theater in Saint-Jean-sur-le-Richelieu, $13 million investment right now. It is what it is. But I have I have an asset that's worth $13 million. If you're now indebting yourself $5 million because you've got to cover a burn rate, you have nothing to show for it. Very important to go for the forgivable loans right now.
Loans. We're with the CEO of Cinema Guzzo, Vince Guzzo. Vince, one last thing for you on this morning, and it has to do with restarting business. So you're shut down, and I am sure you've got some lessons as you prepare to eventually reopen. For a business, let's say like a restaurant that's had to shut down operations, or any other small business that really has not been open, what should they be doing to prepare for the day where it's the green light, it's a gym, and now you can open up your doors?
Well, one of the things you've got to do, and I think you've got to do it not only because it's a smart thing to do for your business, but because it's the human thing to do. I mean, I think you should be in contact on a monthly or once every 2-week basis with your staff and see how they're doing. For some of our restaurants that we own, we've basically done a rotation, where not the same employees work every week just to keep a connection with everybody. We've actually, created a delivery system with employees who normally were just waiters. Now they're using their cars and they're doing a whole delivery system. So you've got to keep your staff engaged, because the biggest investment you've done, apart from your capital expenditures, is an investment in your labor force. And if you're losing them now to either panic, either self-abandonment, my boss doesn't care, et cetera, you're going to reopen and you're going to have a problem attracting everybody back. I can tell you that when we reached out to our 600 employees, part-timers, they were, I would say 90% of them were more than happy and excited to come back. I mean, most of them are, from the age of 15 to 22, but they were all excited to come back because they felt, hey, I can go get some money again, and I can go back to, and that's important. You've got to remember, when we reopen, the infrastructure is there, right? I mean, take an example of my movie theaters. They're there. They haven't gone anywhere. So putting the heating from 10 degrees back up to 21 isn't the problem. You just turn a knob and it's back up. We're ready to go, right? The problem is the staff. Yeah. Is your staff, back? And what will be the rules? I can tell you that when we opened in July, after 3 months of closing, my staff were exceptional. I mean, I spoke to them. There was no fear factor in them. I just made them very responsible and said, look, guys, we got to be careful here. This is not about cutting corners. It's about doing what we got to do to keep people safe. And I can tell you that nobody can associate them being sick to any of my theaters, any of the theaters in Quebec. In fact, I would tell you even in Canada. And so, our teenagers, our youth did an amazing job, as much as sometimes we want to scold them for being, young and irresponsible. Yeah. But the key of reopening is in your labor force being there, because they already know what it is to operate a theater or your business. So
and no bodies, you can't open up the doors. Mr. Guzzo, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me, Eli.
That's Vince Guzzo, CEO of Cinema Guzzo.